gets a little crazier. So student population, I'm gonna copy all these names. All right, just do a quick Command C. And the reason I'm doing that is because when you conduct a stratified random sample, you decide on some criteria by which your population could be broken up. Like you could do a grade level, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. You could do hair color, like whatever you think is a good way to break up the groups. I'd be an outlier on the hair color thing, but like you could come up with anything that makes sense. All right. What I decided to do was break it up by letter of the alphabet. All right. So any name that's between A and G, H and N, O and T. All right. So in order to do that, I need to have the list alphabetical. All right. So I mean, you could go through and count them all up, but I actually want the names. All right. So I'm going to do a paste here, and while it's still highlighted, I'm going to do a sort. So data sort range A to Z. And this is a little bit more, I'll say, brute force. There's nothing really complicated about this, at least in the early going, because all I'm going to do is just take any student whose name begins with the letter from A to G, and I'm going to copy that over into my A to G column. H to N. And then,
how'd you do the sort of names?
so you highlight the information and then go to data, sort range, choose the one that says A to Z. All right. So now I have my population broken up into 3 different groups. I want to make a random selection of 5 individuals from each group. All right. A little easier to do with group 3 because there's less individuals, but group 2, there's a lot of different possibilities. All right. And again, we know the criteria. Does that feel like it's spelled wrong? Criteria is that we're looking for name and broad jump, but the sample size, I want 3 strata. That's why I chose 3 groups, and 5 individuals per stratum. All right. So that's how I know I'm pulling 5 from here, from here, from here, and so on. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to number these values from 1 to whatever the highest number is in the list, in any list. So 1, 2, 3, start typing it, and then drag it. I mean, if you want, you just type all the way to 17. It's nothing too crazy. I mean, if we needed to go from 1 to 17,000, I'd show you the sequence function. But a small sample size is not really that big of a deal.
How did you get the sorted?
I copied it over from the student population. Then I highlighted it, selected data, sort range, A to Z. Yeah.
So say there was a name Zach, would you not include that in the ODT?
If there was a name.
Like just something that started.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, in this case, that's probably what I would do.
You wouldn't include it?
I wouldn't include it, assuming that this was told to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be saying disregard anybody after
Okay.
anybody who starts with a T. But that's a good question. All right. So I numbered so that we can actually draw a random selection, pulling 5 names from here, here, and here. All right. So my random numbers, I'm going to do a rand between again. All right. I have 17 values, so I'm going to do a rand between 1 and 17. All right, so I wanted to randomly select a value between 1 and 17. Oh, actually, sorry, for this one there's only 11 individuals, so from 1 to 11. All right.
Wait, why is it 11 and not 17?
Because,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, Graham is the last one there. All right, I need 5 random digits in that interval, so I'm going to copy this 4 more times. And now I have a random set of values. All right, I want to be able to tie that with a name though. All right, so that's what we're going to do in a sec, but let's get our random numbers for this set also. All right, oh, I don't know if you even know what I copied. So I'll do a copy paste, but this one I want to be able to go up to 17. Copy it down the line. And this one, I want it to go to 6. Well, that's coincidental. I want it to go to 6, and again, copy it down the line.
How many do you copy it down?
Total of 5. All right, and that's only because that's what the directions told us to do. So I want names to go along with these numbers. So that's where we do the VLOOKUP thing again. All right, so equals VLOOKUP. I mean, for this one, it wouldn't be terrible to go in and say, all right, the 9th person is Enzo, the 6th person is Chris, and just type those names. But you know, every time when you're dealing with randomization, every time you change something in the spreadsheet, the random numbers change too. So that you'd be, you know, chasing your own tail there. All right, but I wanted to look up this number, whatever's in G2, it's covered by the question mark, but there's a number there, in this table now. The table that goes from 1 to, I'll drag it all the way down over here. So I wanted to look up whatever that number is. In the case of the first random value, it's the number 8. I wanted to look up the number 8 and bring back, well, only from group 1, the name Declan. All right, that's in the second column. So I have my list. I have my criteria. Oh, I actually lost. That's so weird. All right, I got to tuck it back in there. But that's going to be, again, G27 is the number I wanted to look up. I think I accidentally overwrote it. But I wanted to pull it from the second column, and close enough is good enough. All right. Oops, that's the wrong thing. All right. Since I'm going to be copying down the line here, I want my G27 reference to change to a G28, 29, 30, 31. But I don't want the table that's been referenced to change, so $signs in front of those. And everything else is static, so it's not going to change. All right, so you get this in, you hit enter. It brings back the name Brent. Brent was number 5. It's consistent. Good job. Copy it down the line. Oh, I went too far. All right, so I have my list of values here associated with the names, and these names are only from that second column. Yeah.
Where does the 2 come from again?
The 2 is really important. It's the column in this table here.
So it's the second, okay.
Second column.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. In the last couple minutes, let's see if we can at least get the random selections taken care of here. So I'm going to copy Declan over. It'll say Bennett. Now, what am I looking up? I'm looking up I-27 in that same table, but this time I want the 3rd column. All right? Because this is my second column, this is my 3rd column. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I still got to teach you the rest of this first, and then you'll have time. All right. So, I put due data tonight, but that was a default. I'll change that. All right. So copy down the line. And now I have a second list. Paste. This time I want column 4. Again, copy down the line. You type it right the first time, then the copy paste becomes so much easier. We had a random between 1 and 11, and that was because this column had 11 pieces of data. All right. Then we did random between 1 and 17, random between 1 and 6. All right. There is a way for you to have Excel decide what the random between numbers would be.
How did you insert the names next to the numbers?
I'm getting to that. That's the next part of the explanation. All right. So, but very briefly, if I wanted to, I could go from random between 1, 2, and then I'd have it count up the number of values that are in this column. All right. So I could do a count A. Count A is for alphabetical values. Right. So words, characters, other kinds of strings. Right. So anything that has a letter in it rather than a number. And so then I can highlight the entire column, even going beyond the last data entry or data point, and it'll know that I wanted to count only the numbers between 1 and 11 because there's only 11 values in that set of data. Right? Not a requirement, but it makes it a little bit more portable. Right? Because then I could take this and copy it over and not have to make any adjustments. Just throw some dollar signs in there where appropriate. Right? Not a requirement again, but it's kind of like what they call them, pro tip. It's like you could do a good job and not use any of the shortcuts, but if it doesn't really make sense to you, then that's fine. Right? You could just go by the numbers. Now to get the names, I wanted to do a reference. I wanted to reference in this, really it's kind of a mini table. I'll highlight it. In this little mini table, I want the name in group 1 that corresponds with the number that was selected, right? So we did a VLOOKUP, and I'll actually do this from scratch. All right, E equals VLOOKUP. All right, select the thing that you're looking for. What is the thing that you're looking up? That would be this cell value. Then where should you go to look up that value? Anywhere in this column here. All right. But I wanted to return a value that's in this table, so I'll extend it over. All right, throw some dollar signs on that because I don't want that to change. All right. Then you want to tell it in what row to return the value. All right. So I'm sorry, I keep saying row. I was doing that all day yesterday too. In what column it should be looking for the return value. All right. So this is my number column is column 1, column 2, the one that starts with Ben, Ian, column 3, column 4, Owen. All right. So I wanted to pull back whatever is in the second column because that's the one that's associated with group 1. So comma 2. And then I put the statement of true or false. Do I want it to be an exact match? Like the question that has an answer of either true or false is, are you looking for an exact match? True, yes, I want an exact match to what I have in that first little bit of the VLOOKUP. All right. No, if close enough is good enough. All right. So typically we put no, false, or 0, and it'll pull back what you're asking for it to pull back. So you'll notice here I wrote false, here I wrote 0. That's because they mean the same thing. All right, it's called a Boolean. It's a data type, but basically it's saying 0 always represents false, 1 represents true. So basically, if you look at those numbers as the percent of truth, all right, if I say something is false, what percent of the statement is true? Nothing, 0. All right, if I say a statement is true, what percent of that statement is true? All of it, the whole thing is true. Right? If I'm saying it's true, the whole thing is true. All right, so that's where these values came from. Now, when we go into group 2, the only thing that changes is that you're referencing this cell here, the one with the 12, still the same table, but now I want the third row and still false, versus this one where I'm referencing the 1, all right, in the same table, but now I'm looking for the 4th row. I did it again, 4th column, all right? So we have our, it's really the stratified sample, but the last step, I mean, it's up to you if you want to actually do this last step, because it's all here. This is your stratified random sample. These are the individuals that should participate in the study. But what I did here was I just copied and pasted from this column down here and then just added on the other stuff, all right? But you'll notice I didn't do a traditional copy paste, all right? So here it says Declan because it says Declan here, all right? I want these values to change anytime these values change, which would happen if these values change. And since these values are random, they're gonna change, which means that these are gonna change. I want these to change along with it. So if I wanna copy from one cell to another, one way to do it is just copy paste. The other way to do it is to just reference that cell. So this is H27. So I would just type in equals H27. All right, and I would do that for each one. H28, 29, 30, down the line, all right? I'll actually wipe out the rest so I can show you. All right, so you notice how it changed to Bennett here, now it's Bennett, all right? But let me do it. I want Chris to show up in the first one. That's, again, H27, so equals H27. Enter. Now it's Enzo. Just drag it on down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I have a duplication. And then to the next group, that's J27, so equals J27. Drag it all down the line, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then Pasquale. L27. Now he's Quinn. Identity change. 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I have a list. There is a way, and this would be my stratified random sample. There is a way to do randomization without any repeated values. But the thing is, the more appropriate way to randomize would allow for repeat values. There are certain circumstances where you would disregard the repeats, but if you're looking for a default approach, we would allow for repeats. It's only under special circumstances that we would eliminate any repeated values. All right. Now, in this case, I see that Pasquale came up 3 times. I don't know that I necessarily find value in that, but we know it'll change if I change the spreadsheet, so you could just get what you need. Anyway, what you could then do is if you have this available to you, this sheet, and you're conducting your own study, you can take the names of the individuals in your study, put it in the sorted names list, update this, and then everything else after that is going to change accordingly. All right, so you'd have to update 2 spots. And really the sorted names column was only for the benefit of having something side by side that I could look at and say, okay, these are the values from A to G. But really it's this table. Any adjustment to this table would change the outcome down here, all right? So I need the broad jump values for Billy, Connor, Brent, Ethan, and so on, and anyone else they change into after I type something in. So another VLOOKUP. All right, again, it's the thing that I want to find in the table. So Billy. I want to identify the location of the table, so I have to go back to the student population, and I'm looking for broad jump, all right? So starting with Chris here, I'm going to highlight the whole thing. We don't need that number column anymore because the lookup is going to happen in that first column. Whatever that first column is, that's where the lookup is going to happen. Now the broad jump would be in this table, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 columns over. All right, so I'm going to go back to my example. I'm going to throw some dollar signs around the B and the 3, the L and the 36, because again, I don't want the shape of my table to change. All right, then after that, I'm going to put in a comma 10, and another false. All right. So then once you get that in there, it's just an enter and drag it on down the line, and you have your stratified sample. All right. So again, it's VLOOKUP, in this case G36. I went into the student population tab, highlighted the information I wanted, it brought it back, threw some dollar signs around it, comma 10 because the broad jump values are in the 10th column of the table I highlighted, and if it's not quite exact, that's fine, I'll take it anyway. Right? Things like spacing would become an issue. Like if I typed it, let's say the broad jump value was, I don't know, 52 inches, right? But I type in 52 and then hit a space after it. All right? For whatever reason, I hit the space bar before hitting enter and locking it in. Right? That's not quite a match, right? Or the same thing with Billy. You know, actually, it's more appropriate to say for Billy. So if I type in Billy, hit space, then enter, as opposed to just typing in Billy. Right? Hitting 0 here, hitting false will allow either of those to come back. All right. And also, if in some instance I put like, I know there's a few Jacksons maybe or Leos. I think there's a couple of Leos. In those instances, if I wanted to put the first initial of the last name, but I'm looking for Leo, either of the Leos, it'll still bring it back, even if I put an additional character. Right? It's looking for Leo within the string of characters. All right, so enter, broad jump 69, go on down the line, do a quick check, make sure it's referencing everything the right way. It is, so we're good to go. So now I have a random sample of values, specifically a stratified random sample. All right, so I wanted to get representatives from each category. Now, breaking up a population by parts of the last name, I mean, if there's no other variable at work, then that might not be overly meaningful. But your guidance counselors, for example, like each counselor has a certain segment of the population, all right? So it's not like you just meet with whatever counselor you want. You're assigned a counselor based off of the first letter of your last name, all right? And so maybe we wanted to test to see if students perform better in math with one counselor as opposed to another, as opposed to another. I mean, it seems like apples and oranges, but it's the best example I can think of at the moment. You could also do, well, I guess you could do it by like math teacher. I think that would make more sense. All right, so any student that has, Miss P versus me versus, anyone you could think of, and have all that data, then that would be an example of stratified if I'm pulling a few data points from each teacher's set. All right, but that's the kind of stuff that you want to start thinking about, especially, I mean, aside from the fact that it's going to be part of a project, it's more like how do you create a sample of values without, I'll just say it, without killing yourself in the process. Like you're going to spend hours creating a simple random sample, or maybe you can do a cluster sample and still have randomization, but not be overwhelmed in the process. All right. So speaking of cluster sample, same idea initially as stratified. You want to break up the population into smaller groups based off of some common characteristic, but then you want to randomly select the entire cluster, right? So groups, strata, clusters, they all really mean the same thing as what you do after you create the groups. Thank you. All right, so this is much simpler because all I would really want is a random number between 1 and 3. All right, so much easier. So equals rand between 1 and 3. It's going to return a value between 1 and 3. There's a way to do this with conditionals. and I believe that's what I put in the solved example. But if you really just needed to pull a data set, like it's a one and done. So the random number is 2, so I would just take all of these values here. But again, we know that it's all going to change. So let me just show you really quickly. So this is the command that you would need in order to copy the appropriate value. All right, I'm just gonna copy it over and talk about it. All right, so I just want to make it a little bit bigger here, and then there we go. Okay, cool, thank you. All right, so I have 3 conditional statements here. The way an if conditional works is you have really the 3 components. One would be what the condition is, then what happens if the condition is true, and what happens if the condition is false. All right, so let me just kind of deconstruct this a little bit. All right, so what this is saying is if the value I have in N26 is equal to 1, then I want N7 as a result. All right, so then, actually let me zoom out. Gonna be a lot of zooming back and forth here. Ah, no, that's not what I wanted. All right, I'll fix that in a minute. All right, so N7 would be the name Ben. All right, so if 1 is selected, thanks, Wes. If 1 is selected, I want Excel to return the name Ben. All right, but I also want it to return the name Bennett, Billy, Brendan, and so on down the line. Anyone who's in group 1, all right? Otherwise, I want it to move on to group 2 or group 3, all right? So that's where the other stuff comes into play. So I'll put it back now, and we'll look at the second piece. Oh, I have an extra comma now. So that second piece is saying, all right, so again, there's the 3 parts. If N26 is equal to 1, then print out N7. Trapped. Otherwise, I would say if N26 is equal to 2, then print out 07. All right, that would be the first value in the second column. All right, so then if that's not true, all right, so if N26 is not equal to 2, then I wouldn't print out 07.
You need this?
Nah, I bought my own. The third possibility would be if N26 is equal to 3, and since there's only 3 values, those are the only 3 I'm worried about, then print out P7. All right. So that's the command that returns the thing that we're looking for. All right. Which, I guess wasn't grammatically the best way of saying that. Let me bring it back. All right. So the first number that comes up is 2, or the only number that comes up is 2. That's the random value that decides what group we're in. It now returns Ian. All right. Now, since I want a total of 3, just the one selected cluster, I have to account for the fact that it could be as many as 17 individuals. So I'm going to drag this down 17 cells. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. All right. So you'll see that when it selects a 1, it's not going to fill up that entire column. All right. But if it does end up being a 2, we have the room for it. So it's adjusting based off of the information that's there. Now, like I said, this goes under the category of like pro tip, because if you're doing this for your own purposes, you have a list of values, you make a random selection, you don't need it to change if the random values change, because you're just going to take that one selection. So it's just straight copy paste values. All right. But if you want something that's flexible enough so that you could change the data and it's still going to work, this is the way to go. All right. So now I needed to bring back the number of push-ups that correspond with Ben, Bennett, and so on, or whoever they change into. So another VLOOKUP. I wanted to look up Ben in the table, the big old table, the student population. All right, still highlighted from before, but I'll do it again. All right, so that happens. For some reason, I don't know. I haven't figured out why I keep screwing that up, but it should be VLOOKUP this. You know what it was? I didn't put the comma. So comma, so O26, comma, then highlight. All right. Get some dollar signs in there. All right. Find the column that contains the push-ups. All right, so that would be column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So column 5. And close enough is good enough. And so once you have that, oh, following along on the phone, I see. All right, so I accidentally had a closed paren here. So now we have the push-ups. Drag it on down the line. Dollar signs will make sure it's always pointing to the same thing, same table. And now I have push-ups, but you can see that the data set changed to random number 2, and now I don't have enough. Drag it all the way down 17 spots, and you'll have what you need.
Could you just show how to do the names again?
How to come up with,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'll just take it from the top here. Actually, let me just wipe out the whole thing, because between VLOOKUP and conditionals is probably two of the hardest things that we're going to work on with this. But we wouldn't do it if it wasn't useful, right? Because I see it all the time in the professional world, especially people that I train in Excel, that this has value, right? Because we have like learning management systems like Schoology and things like that do a lot of this stuff for you. But in the real world, most people just construct their own Excels, right? So equals if. Now, I have to make the statement of condition, right? What am I looking for? I'm looking to see, oh, dang it. Hold on. No, I want to undo. Okay. Undo and redo. I got them backwards. So if this number, N26, is equal to 1. But the thing is, I want to copy it down a line, and I don't want that 26 to change to a 27, 28, 29, 30, and so on. I always want it to point to this cell. So I definitely make sure I put a dollar sign on the 26. Since I'm not changing the column, I don't really need it for the N, but I put it anyway. If that number is equal to 1, then I want it to print this entry, the first entry in group 1. All right. Otherwise, I wanted to evaluate and see if it's more like it should be group 2 or group 3. So I'm going to do another if, same N26 equals, so a little copy paste goes a long way. If that number equals 2, then I want the first entry in the second column. All right. And if that's not true, so if N26 is equal to 2, then I'll get whatever's in 07. Otherwise, it could be the case that N26 is equal to 3, in which case I want P7. All right. Now, if it's something other than that, then you know, like if there's another possibility, you'd keep going. Or maybe you put a statement in there that you just want it to say none. You know, if it's not satisfied, you could do that too. But if there is no other condition, so if, output beyond this, then you could just close it up. All right, so I close it up for the third if, the second if, and the first if. And then it brings back the name. All right. So then I just drag that on down the line. Wherever it went. I got to zoom back out because I can't see. It's one of the drawbacks to this, obviously. All right. I went too far because now it says push-ups there for some reason. So I don't need the conditionals here. I just need to go there. All right. So it changes appropriately. And we did the VLOOKUP already, so it already has that stuff.
In the assignment, it says name and chin-ups, but aren't we only supposed to be looking at the baseball population?
Yeah, I'm still editing that. So don't do anything with baseball yet. Yeah, so we're still working on the example, and tomorrow we'll get to the baseball stuff. All right. So the last one is systematic, and yeah, if we don't end up finishing it today, we'll finish it tomorrow. It's fine. All right, but you're gonna have time in class. Oh, by the way, this is probably a good time to ask. Show of hands for seniors. How many people are not going to be in class for a workshop tomorrow? All right, so a good number. All right, so I'll see what I can figure out in terms of scheduling. So anyway, what I want to do here is pull back height and weight, so I'm not looking for names, protect the identity, you know, that sort of thing, for every fifth individual in alphabetical order. All right. So now it could be the case that you have, you know, like only 5 values in the population, in which case a systematic random sample wouldn't make sense. All right. What will happen is this 5 is the number that would normally be randomly selected. All right. But I want to show you how you could actually generate the appropriate random selection once you've, the appropriate selection once you've identified the nth individual. All right. So it could be, for systematic, it could be every 4th person, every 10th person, whatever. So the population size really has an impact there, because if I were to say during passing period, I would take the 3rd person I see as people are walking down the hall and have them be part of my study. Right? That, I don't know, is going to be very practical. Right? Especially when you have a mob of people coming by. Like, if they're walking at the same rate in a group, which one's the 3rd person? It's too hard to tell. All right. So you could modify it by saying you're going to collect data from whoever is around you every 3rd minute. Right. So you could redefine. It doesn't necessarily have to be a number of individuals. It could be periods of time. You know, so every 5 minutes. So it's the repetitive part of it. Every 5 minutes, you'd make a new selection. All right. But in this case, if we're saying every 5th individual, well, we have a total of 34 34? I already forgot. I think it's 34. 34 individuals that we can work with. We want to pull up a random value. So, but what I'm going to do is I'll start off with just typing in the numbers 1 to 34. All right. So just drag it on down the line until you have 34. There is a sequence method, but I feel like I'm kind of throwing enough at you already that maybe I'll hold off on that for another day. All right, so this is the rank of values, or the available individuals. Now what I want to do is grab every 5th value. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that would be my first value. then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 would be my second value, 15 would be my third, and so on. All right. If you only have 34 values in a set, you don't want to do something crazy like every 12th value. You'd only get 2 members of the set. All right. So we want to do something that's small, not too small, because if I say every 1 value, now you're polling everybody. That's a census. All right. But what I want Excel to do is come up with values based off of whatever this number is. All right. So if I say n is equal to what, the return on that should be 5. All right. But I want it to be flexible enough that n could be equal to anything. All right. So I'm just going to move this over a little bit. I'll throw a little highlight on that so it makes it a little bit more obvious. All right. So what's n? N is equal to 5. I guess I don't have to make it that small. All right. So I want every 5th value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever is stored in R and multiply it by 5. All right. So equals this number times this number. All right. Now that S4 is never going to change, or I never want it to change. So $signs for that. The R6 I want to become R7, R8, and so on down the line. So my first entry is 5. I can go down. It stops being relevant after a while. So only go as far as relevance takes you. All right. So, but you could have the whole list if you want. Like that's a lot of values. I don't have more than 34 people, so it would stop at this point here. So these would be the only ones I'm interested in. All right. So the 5th, the 10th, all the way up to the 30th value in the original table. So back to VLOOKUP. All right. I want it to look up the 5th value in the population. So now I need that first column because that's my reference column. All right, the 5th value in this population, I'm looking for height and weight. So 1, 2, 3, column 3, column 4. All right, so I'm going to keep that in mind. I want some $signs around my A3 and my L36. We use $signs so often that I kind of wish it was a default setting, but it really isn't. You just got to remember to put it in. All right. So student population, that whole table, I want the 3rd column here. Close enough is good enough. So I got a height. Now I want the corresponding weight. All right. So I'm going to take this, copy it over. It says NA because there's some reference issues. It's still pointing to the correct table, but for some reason it thinks that I want to look at T6. No, I still want to look at R6. I'm sorry, S6. All right. I want it to pull back whatever is relevant for that number 5. All right. And I don't want the 3rd column anymore. I want the 4th one, the one that has the weights. All right. So now we're good. Oh, no, we're not good. It changed it again. Oh, because I didn't hit accept the change. Like a schlemiel. Let me put that in there. Let's get rid of that. It was there. It just changed on me. I don't know. You know what I did? I hit paste again for some foolish reason. All right, so S6 going from A3 to L36, column 4, close enough is good enough. All right, so now we have that information. We could drag them both simultaneously down the line. All right, now it is possible that let's say the n value is equal to 1, that maybe somebody wants, for whatever reason, a systematic random sample where every individual is selected. I mean, that doesn't make it systematic, but technically it follows the rule. We could have upwards of 34 values. But really, 2 would be probably the first instance where it goes from being a census to a systematic sample, because every second value starts to limit the process. So we could have really as many as 17 values, because there's 34, cut it in half. It'll say NA when it's not relevant, all right? So we could just ignore that. The ones that we want are here, they're present, but now if I did something like every second value, it'll bring back those numbers for us, all right? If I did every 34th value, it's only going to bring back one value, one number. But maybe, you know, kind of a compromise, we'll say every 8th value. You know, so not a trivial sample, but, you know, it's not overly lengthy. But they said to do 5 here. I just try to get you something that could be as copy-pastable as possible.